Today we're going to be talking about breaking in the kip, why some people do it, why some people don't do it, and some of the advantages to actually not breaking in the kip. So when we talk about breaking in the kip, generally we're talking about kipping, gymnastic kipping or butterfly kipping on a pull-up bar. So we're thinking toes to bar, kipping pull-ups, kipping chest to bar pull-ups, and bar muscle-ups. Now if we think about the break in the position that we're talking about, we're mainly talking about the hollow arch position. In the kip, we generally have three positions. The first position is the dead hang position, where you're essentially directly underneath the bar. The next position you have is the hollow, where we're behind the bar, back here somewhere. And then the third position is our hollow arch position, where our head's coming forward and our feet are reaching back behind the bar. That is generally the hollow arch, where we're talking about breaking in the kip. Now, talking about the break generally happens at the line of the knee and through the lower back. So if we just highlight that quickly here, it's these two positions. And now what I want to think about is when you compare the two, let's take my guy on the right here with a little smile on his face versus my not so happy guy who's breaking in the kip here. I want you to think about this guy as a nice long driver you might be using on a golf course, for anyone who likes that metaphor and analogy. Being on a golf course, a nice long driver off the tee, versus me giving you a child's driver off the tee and asking you to hit it as far as you can. Essentially, this person has got tension running from the hands all the way through the midline, all the way to the feet. So it's a nice long golf club they're using. This person probably has tension running probably to about the bottom of his rib cage, or kind of where his scapula finish. Otherwise, all of this down here is essentially just dead weight hanging underneath his body. So, what are some of the advantages we might have? Well, firstly, you might be thinking, well, Ant, I've seen CrossFit Games athletes, I've seen half-decent gymnastic athletes or people who are pretty good at gymnastics within the sport of CrossFit do 30 unbroken bar and ring muscle-ups like this. See them do a 50 plus unbroken toes to bar. Now, of course, don't forget, you can always build capacity even if the movement is less than ideal or not perfect. So, for example, those athletes that have practiced years and years and years like this, and they've done thousands, hundreds of thousands of reps of a muscle up, a toes to bar, a pull up, they might actually develop some pretty damn good and impressive capabilities and capacity in this position. But could we make them better as coaches? For sure we can. If we think about the application of keeping more tension as we come forward and through in the hollow arch position, keeping more tension will allow us to actually bring back more speed into the arch position with less work, which means it's more efficient. Also, the kip is generally tighter, so you don't go through as far. When you don't go through as far, generally the grip's going to get saved as well. So, where this is generally a problem, where we see it the most, number one, we probably see this in a lot of time women. We see this. Generally, we talk about women because they're generally a bit more flexible, a bit more mobile than men are. So when we talk about being flexible, we are not talking about mobility. So there's a difference between the two, which I'll explain in a sec. And we generally see this in just people who are new to kipping and don't really know what's going on because they've just seen people swinging on a bar and they assume that bigger is generally better. Bigger means more speed, bigger means more power, which generally it doesn't. So where this might be a problem for people who are getting into CrossFit who are more flexible, if we think about the application of my shoulder and the shoulder girdle, if I can actively being the strength that I have in my own range, bring my shoulder into this position while still maintaining a tight position in the midline. So let's say I've got about 180 degrees of flexion through my shoulder from this position all the way back up. But actually when we're kipping, suddenly when we're driving our head through into this crazy position, our shoulder's now being pushed back into this position, which is way over 180 degrees. Now we talk about having strength in ranges, of course, when you're moving through something like a kip, there's a huge amount of range being used. And if you don't have strength in that extreme range of motion back here, and now you're throwing body weight into it, 60 kg plus with speed through that hollow arch position, you're really putting the body at risk of injury. And unfortunately, that's why CrossFit can unfortunately get a pretty bad rap for movements like the kipping movement. And sometimes you do look at people doing it and you kind of crease and think that person's going to get injured very, very soon. So if you can actually work on tightening people up through the midline, this part here of my happy guy, we can tighten up through here. That immediately stops the amount of range that you can drive the shoulder into flexion. As soon as you break in here, that shoulder is going to start really driving through into weak positions. Don't forget, flexibility and mobility. Flexibility is more passive range. How far can someone else just kind of yank your shoulder into position? Mobility is how much active range, how much range can you put that shoulder with strength into that position. So we're going to quickly go and give a visual demonstration of what this looks like and why you guys should pretty much try and do it. Generally, when you learn, firstly, safer, more efficient, and hopefully it will teach you better mechanics, which will help bleed in from the toes to bar into the pull-up, into the chest to bar, then into the bar muscle-up. As we always try and teach you guys, clean up the movement first before you go into the next part. If you're someone who already has toes to bar, pull-ups, bar muscle-ups, and chest to bars, and you know you look like this, there's no point just saying, okay, I'm going to be now this person. What you're going to have to do is now re-break down your kip and practice beat swinging, practice hips to bar, practice toes to bar, pull-ups and bar muscle-ups, with the real focus being on a tighter, longer leg and midline to hopefully in the future help you really accelerate the capacity that you have on that pull-up bar. Now, of course, just practicing this sort of drill and just kind of swinging on the bar can be pretty frustrating and quite tiring if you're not actually seeing improvement. So there are definitely a few physical things that you can use, such as a towel, where you basically put it between your knees or between your feet to help you maintain tension between your legs, which hopefully should come up through the body as well. Or we can do things like use a band where we can actually attach it around our feet. Now, I'm not talking about binding up your feet, because then you're not going to be able to jump up to a pull-up bar. It's just going to look a bit silly and doesn't really have much application to you feeling the body, which is, of course, what we always strive for. The athlete should understand how it feels versus just being forced into position with an external implement. So with a band, you can actually attach it behind the pull-up bar and then to the feet, which will actually physically pull the body into this position. You should be able to feel your bum squeezing a little bit tighter and the rib cage pulling down. Otherwise, as soon as the knee bends, the band will simply just flick off your feet. And that's talking about for a toes to bar, which is the most simple of our four kipping movements: the toes to bar, the pull up, the chest to bar, and the bar muscle up. Similarly, you can actually stick this between the rig directly underneath your pull up bar, and that gives you an object to hit each time. And the tighter you are, the more the object will respond to you and help you accelerate through the positions.